People, they all from everywhere, and just like earlier and late, And I think I feel very lucky since I arrived to Australia. I got many chance to show my works and also got many like grant fellowship and even I got the doctors last year in Western Sydney. And I feel very confident in here and also. Yeah, I feel I should, and very positive in Australia, and I hope I can make a more interesting work for the society or something.
Oh, thank you. That's a great answer, Nancy.
The advantages of being Chinese Australian as an artist are many. If you fully embrace the cultural heritage that is. I know there's a lot of artists who sometimes resist that heritage side, but the advantage of having that heritage is that as an artist, your job is to explore your identity and background and interesting aspects that you can bring your own perspective to. So if you're looking into Chinese history, you don't need to go very far, only a few hundred years. Before you find an interesting story, aspect, epic that you can explore and work into. So I use a lot of those epics and kind of reinterpret them from my lens as 21st century Australian woman. And yeah, it's quite good.
It's great, it's hearing all these answers. It's really heartening. My next question is also a layman's question. When my son was 4 or 5 years old, and he said he's going to draw a line, and so he set out very excitedly to do that. And 10 minutes later, I heard him sobbing. So I went over and asked him what's wrong, and he said the line didn't look like the one he wanted to draw. So I'm sure we all have that feeling of frustration of the gap between your mind and your hands. So my question to the artist, do you ever, as an artist, experience what you want to set out to create didn't turn out to be the one that you originally have in mind? And if yes, how do you deal with that? And if no, how do you manage that it never happened?
Yeah, I had very recently actually a piece in this exhibition. Generally with my process, because it's so long, it takes like 5 to 9 months to create, I would have a very strong idea of what it will be, and I'm planning out through all the stages. But working with glass, accidents can happen very often, 40% rate of failure. One of the piece, I've brought it up to pretty much the final stage, and I've just taken it into the kiln and for final fire polish, and it came out with a crack right down the middle. And at first, it's always a bit shocking and frustrating, but if I was working entirely from a craftsman point of view, I would have probably invested everything and put it back into kiln for final firing and molded it together. But as an artist, I took a step back and thought about the message within the work. And you have to realize that as an artist, that you have to be open to influences, open to what your medium is telling you, and open to happy accidents, as Ross would call it. So I decided to keep the crack, because it actually adds to the message of my work rather than detracts from it.
That's great, excellent. One way, do you have experience? That is something you want to create?
那个问题我没太听明，你再中文说一遍。
就是你本来要做的一件东西，其实做出来和你想象的不一样。有过这样的经历吗？你怎么样处理的？还是你就以败为胜？
Yeah, this is called misunderstanding, something like this. And that's interesting because for my experience, I created the one of the works. The Australian audience, when they look in my works, sometimes they not follow my ideas. They also create the new ideas. For example, I did one of the series work called the Tactile Baby series. This series work talking about science and art, and influence to the human beings. But when this series, because this picture I use one of the tube, and on the tube they have the baby, but this baby from the Chinese traditional folk art, like a big baby. This means for good luck, and you have many children or something. But I always find this is a very fat boys, this in this series. But one of the Australian critics after read this series of work, they talking about creative to the Chinese one-child policies. They're totally different for my beginnings ideas. And I said, okay, of course, you're right. You have thinking this ways, and I think it's very interesting. For the beginnings are creative. One of my work is called Island. These big pictures collected by the National Gallery in cameras, and they show last year, in there. And this is talking about adventure discovered Australia something upon many boats. But in the same time, the refugee situation is very strong, in Australians. But suddenly I think, maybe I should put the refugee boat, came to Australia. That's why since 2002, upon the first time make the refugee boat in these pictures, they call the island. But later on, I never stopped. The biggest one I did in MCA is 2013. I made a big boat, the refugees, the boat. They're struggling, came to the Australians. Later I did many refugee boats, in the Berlin and the American, also even in China. This is like my samples, But this is from not in my beginnings. I did later from the newspaper, from the creations, and from others gave me the strong ideas. Okay, go away, go strong, go this way. Yes. This
thank you.
By the misunderstanding.
Which is great, yes. Yeah, Christina.
Yes, I believe when making artworks or when practicing as an artist, failure is actually quite an important part of the process. And I actually don't see it, I don't regard these things as failures as such, mainly because I view every single work that I do as a stepping stone or a stone that I lay in a path that I'm continuing on. And they're all opportunities to actually learn. The only thing that I am ever sort of worried about is actually not fulfilling expectations. And that's actually something that you would put upon yourself. And you would assume that other people are putting upon you. But that's something that I try to deal with and actually mitigate by then remembering that I'm an artist who is actually constantly evolving. So when you actually think of yourself not